My name is Norman Swafford. I'm an old Vietnam veteran. Came back from the war and opened up my photography business and been doing that ever since. Boerne, Missouri.
What was it like growing up in a small town like Boerne?
Well, my mother was the office nurse for Dr. Kelly, who was the local physician for 40-some years in Boerne, and she was with him that whole time. And in those days, they would work usually. Back when I was a young boy, they didn't close the doctor's office until 9 o'clock at night, and they would stay open on Saturday night till 10 o'clock, and I was kind of the town pet. I ran the streets, and everybody knew me and was nice to me, and we didn't have a whole lot. As a young boy, when Gunsmoke came out on TV, the man who owned Mr. Williams' TV shop there on the alley by the barber shop would turn a television towards the street and leave the sound turned up. And while my mom was at the doctor's office, I'd stand on the street and watch Gunsmoke. And then a few months later, well, Mom got us a TV and I didn't have to stand on the street and watch it. But I was the kid in school that nobody wanted on their ball team. For one thing, I hated to sweat, and I still do. Growing up, we didn't have air conditioning at home. And I told my mama every night, when I get to be a big boy and I have my own place, if you come to my house, you better bring a coat because you're going to freeze to death. And my house is like that. Debbie's testifying. It's that way. I hate to sweat, and if you're going to play ball, basketball, sports, you have to sweat. So I didn't like that. My band director, Ted Feder, Russia had put a satellite up called Sputnik, and I had this little Kodak Duoflex camera, and I had it on a tripod one night on time exposure, and had it aimed at the sky, and Sputnik was coming over. And he sees me out in the street in front of his apartment taking this picture. He comes out and he says, "You want to see what you got?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we'll go in my kitchen, we'll process your film." He said, "I've got an old Tri-Chem pack left over from college," and he said, "We'll put some towels over the kitchen window and shut the door and we'll do this." We mix this stuff up in 3 oat bowls, cereal bowls. And we're in there and we're dipping and dunking, processing this film in the dark and timing it, and then run it through all 3 things and get it into the clearing solution and turn the light on, and bang, there's my film. Here is pictures of that satellite streaking across the film. Well, I was hooked. I built this studio out here in the year of 2000. Came out here from Boerne. Going in. This is up on the mountain. I believe it's the highest flowing river east of the Mississippi. And there are all kinds of waterfalls on that little river. And Debbie and I happened to find it one day. spent the day over there making pictures of waterfalls. We're
Which we
waterfall
love.
nuts. Upper Falls is up behind that waterfall and around to the left, but Lower Falls is more famous because it's 308 feet and it comes down and into that, what they call the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. And that photograph was actually made from Artist Point. And everybody gets an Artist Point, and the painters and artists and photographers, there'll be 40 or 50 people there at one time taking pictures. It's one of the most beautiful places in that part of the country. Well, my biggest thing was to get out of school. I was tired of it, and I went to college for a semester over at Cape and was bored with that. And I was going to get out of school and make my fortune. So my motivational year in life I spent at Brown Shoe Company in Bernie. And believe me, if that won't motivate you, nothing will. I left there and I wound up coming down to Federal Mogul. I helped build that plant over there when it started. And working there, I worked with a bunch of old World War II veterans. And I would eat lunch with them every day, and we'd work together, and they would tell me war stories from World War II. And I'm thinking, golly, I'll never get to do that. I missed all this fun and everything. And Vietnam was going on, and I decided I wanted to go to the Airborne Special Forces program and become a Green Beret. So I joined the Army and wound up in jump school down in Fort Benning, Georgia, and there was an accident there involving about 200 paratroopers, and I wound up being assigned to the 8th Division in Bad Kreuznach, Germany. When you are in the Army, if you don't have your 201 file and your pay records, you don't exist. They're going to feed you and give you a place to stay, but you do not exist because you don't have those records. I signed in to the 8th replacement and I turned in my records, and I was there a week, I was there 2 weeks, and I was there 3 weeks, and they said my records were gone. Well, the company clerk there and I became good friends, and one night we had gone down to the EM club, and he told me what was going on there. That first sergeant was trading GIs, soldiers, like you'd trade buckets of paint. He would change your MOS and sign you somewhere where you really didn't need to be because you hadn't been trained for it. He was dealing in humans. And the clerk told me, he said, this was like on a Monday, he said, Friday he's going to ship you up to Baumholder. Baumholder, Germany was not a place you wanted to be. It was where Adolf Hitler trained his panzer troops because the conditions there were so bad. Hitler thought if they could function in Baumholder, they could function anywhere in the world. I didn't want to go there. My uncle, upon leaving, the last thing he said to me when he took me to the bus was, you may need some help at one time or another, and if you do, you should go see the chaplain. Well, I asked to see the chaplain and I was refused. And I asked 3 times, and 3 times he wouldn't let me go. Now this was an old Adolf Hitler storm soldier caserne that we lived in. It was an old German base, and it had a barrier around it made of barbed wire and concertina wire. And I knew where the chaplain's office was, just outside the perimeter. So I walked around the base one day and I found a hole in that perimeter. Well, that night I signed out for the EM club, and I waited till it got dark and I made my way through that opening in the fence. And I knocked on the chaplain's door and I said, "Sir, I'm absent without leave. I've asked to see you 3 times, and 3 times I've been turned down." He said, "Come in, Swafford. Tell me what I can do for you." And I sat down with him and I explained what was going on. I said, "I didn't join the Army to become a bucket of paint or a chattel to be traded." And I said, "Sir, I'm not going to sit still for this." I said, "I have a friend back home who has the ear of our congressman." And I said, "I can have a congressional inquiry on that general's desk in about 10 days. I don't want to do it, but I will." And he said, "Can you get back on the base without getting caught?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You go back, you'll hear from me by 10 o'clock in the morning." I went back, and at 10 o'clock the next morning, this big tall captain walks in. And he said, "I'm looking for Swafford." I stood up, saluted him. He says, "Swafford, there's a Jeep out front. Get your duffel bag, put it in that Jeep." He said, "I'll be right out." He turned to that first sergeant. He said, "First sergeant, get me his pay records and 201 file out of that bottom right-hand drawer." The clerk told me where they were. And the sergeant looks at him like, "How's he know they're there?" And he said, "I said, now, First Sergeant." He gave him my records and we walked out. When we got in the Jeep, he took his hand, shook hands with me, and he said, "Swafford, my name's Dallas Wood. I'm from Leif, Arkansas, down by Paragould, and I heard a boy from back home needed some help." He said, "You work for me now." And I did. I went to work for Captain Wood and wound up in the staff judge advocate section and that's where I got my acquaintance with the judicial system. And I was there a year. And I went to work. Larry Sailors told me they were looking for help at the Rod and Gun Club. I went to work over there. That's where I met and became acquainted and friends with Chris Christopherson. He was the custodian of the fund, and I worked there after duty hours. And I had a free allotment of beer I could give away, which made me a real powerful E4, because Norm had free beer. And I made sure the right people never went thirsty. Well, we're in there one day on a Sunday, and Armed Forces Radio Network came on and said, "We interrupt this program to advise you we have just bombed Haiphong Harbor in North Vietnam." Everybody's hat went in the air. And the 𝗁𝐶𝐲𝐿𝐭𝐲 personnel always sat on the corner bar stool, and Mac was sitting there, and I shoved him a free beer, and I said, "Mac, I want to go to flight school." He said, "Okay," but he said, "You got to come over in the morning and take the ARAB test. That's the Army Rotary Wing Aptitude Battery Test." He said, "Don't worry about passing, I'll see that you do." So I go over, tell Top what I'm doing. He said, "Go ahead." He let me off from duty to go take the test. And that evening, I go open the club back up. Mac comes in, sits down in his stool. I shove him another drink. I said, "Well, how'd I do?" He took a draw off of it. He said, "Do you know how to fly?" I said, "Well, I used to hitchhike up to Dexter," and I said, "I had some flying lessons from Harry Bennett. I've always liked airplanes." He said, "You got any long-term obligations here?" And I said, "No, I'm free as a bird." He said, "Well, that's good," because he said, "You wanted to go to flight school." He said, "You just made the highest score on that test that's ever been made in the European theater, and I didn't help you." He said, "You did it on your own." And he said, "As we speak, your test is on the courier jet headed for the Pentagon." And he said, "It's going to get there tonight. They're going to cut orders on you tomorrow and put them on the return flight." He said, "Pack your bags, you're gone." Friday night, I'm downtown in a guest house having a schnitzel, and the officer of the day walks in. He said, "I'm looking for Swafford." And I stood up, laid one on him. He said, "Let's go." I said, "Where are we going, Lieutenant?" He looked at his watch. He said, "You got 2 hours to catch a plane in Frankfurt. You're going to flight school, and I've got to get you there." And it was that quick. I applied on Monday. On Friday night, I was catching a plane in Frankfurt headed for flight school. And it was fantastic.
In a few minutes, these Army combat troops will be miles from here. They will arrive at the place and at the time dictated by the necessities of their mission. They will pass swiftly over terrain that would take days of travel on foot. They arrive fresh, fully equipped, and ready to function. This is possible because of the strange-looking, savage-sounding machines that brought them, the Army helicopters. And the men who fly the choppers are skilled, highly trained professionals, experts in this new aspect of Army mobility. Just where and how these men acquire that expertise is the subject of today's Big Picture.
500 of us started that class, 6615, and 175 of us graduated. That was what the attrition rate was. And most of that was done because there was a little block in the upper left-hand corner of the checklist, and that word up there was judgment. And if you got a bad mark in that, just pack your bags, you were gone. Because you cannot teach judgment. You're either born with it or you aren't. And it washed a lot of guys out. But thank to the good Lord I made it.
Finally, everything the candidate pilot has learned is put to the test during an 8-day problem in the field toward the end of his stay at Rucker. For a week and a day, he lives and works in the boondocks, getting a foretaste of the type of working conditions he'll experience overseas. Troop lift, resupply, casualty evacuation, armed reconnaissance, armed escort, day and night navigation from point to point, on schedule and on the mark. This is what this 8 days is all about. And there's no doubt in anyone's mind as to the reality of the operation they are preparing for.
We formed up a new company at Fort Campbell, totally green, no experience with combat, and we took that company to South Vietnam. They shipped our helicopters and our equipment on boats, and they shipped us on a C-141 cargo plane. And the seats in that plane for that 22-hour flight we sat on our duffel bags. It wasn't first class. And we landed, refueled in Anchorage, Alaska, and from there we refueled in Yokota, Japan, and then we finally landed at Bien Hoa in South Vietnam. And here we are flown into this combat zone, and all of us officers had been issued 38 specials and 6 bullets. And we landed at Bien Hoa, and they dropped the back ramp on that big cargo plane, and we're about to get off with our pistols drawn because we're going into combat. And one of my buddies that I knew from flight school is standing on the ramp in a Hawaiian shirt with a beer saying, "Welcome to the war, guys."
Left the big city for the simple country life. Found myself a woman that it took for me to be my wife. I was working on the ground come the sun up to sundown. Hey, I'm trying to make a reputation for a man inside this town. Hard as I try, maybe I just can't. I ain't no up and kinda leaving name. She kissed me one time and she took my heart. Baby, you can love me, you can leave me, I'm a honky-tonk star. Yeah, I'm a honky-tonk star. Well, working 3 jobs, living out of a car. Mama never told me life would get this hard. Running around the world playing my guitar. Baby, you can love me, you can leave me, I'm a honky-tonk star. Yeah, I'm a honky-tonk star.
We flew what was called SOG missions. SOG stood for Special Observations Group, and what we did, we flew the Special Forces Green Berets on some of their missions. And everything they did was top secret. You never knew what you were going to do till you got in the air. And we're up at 𝗧𝗵𝗺 and going to pull this mission. And it's about 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting out on some sandbags, smoking my pipe, and this Jolly Green Giant lands in the compound. Jolly Green Giants were the Air Force's air-sea rescue helicopters. They rescued downed pilots. And that's about all they did. And when a Jolly Green Giant showed up, you knew this wasn't a routine mission. And I thought, we're going to North Vietnam. And I had a few days, but I was a short timer. I had less than 100 days to go. And in a war, if you get down in the 2 digits, you get what's called the 2-digit fidgets. You want to be as safe as you can. Well, I'm sitting out there thinking, here we go. And the executive officer walked out. He sat down with me, Major Cochran, and he says, "Norm, I need a favor." I said, "Yes, sir, you majors are always asking us W-2s for favors." He said, you don't have to do this, but I really need your help. He said, "We're short about 25–30% of our TO&E, that's equipment." And he said, "If that's not recovered by the time you and I go home about the same time," he said, "my military career is over." And he said, "I know about your ability to quietly lay your hands on government material." And he said, I need for you to recover that stuff off the record. He said, "You're going to have to steal it." And he said, "We have a helicopter that the radios have quit on. We can't take it on the mission." He said, "Can you find your way back home without radios?" I said, "Yes, sir, I can." He says, "You're going to have to steal it." I said, "I can do that." So in about 5 minutes, I've got them rotor blades turning, man. He's giving me a chance to, I'm gone. He runs out there and he said, I thought, he's changed his mind. He said, "I want to send one of the other pilots with you so he can go on R&R. I said, "Major, this airline's leaving in 5 minutes. I said, "He needs to get here." And he run and jumped in with me. We went back and I started rounding the stuff up. Well, I found out real quick where a lot of it had gone. And our first sergeant was running him a business downtown and stealing the stuff from the unit to supply it. I started recovering the stuff. And how I did it, I found out there was a meat locker down at 𝗵𝗄 Bay. And if I took captured AK-47s down there that I got from the Green Berets, I could trade them for cases of steak. And you can get anything in a combat zone for a case of steak. I would trade this stuff, and one of the main things I needed was like 2,500 bed sheets. And I put the word out that I was trying to recover these bed sheets, and I get a call one day from the MP commander, a colonel at Nha Trang. And he said, "Mr. Swafford, this is Colonel so-and-so." He said, "I'm the CEO of the such and such MP company at Nha Trang. I understand you need 2,500 bed sheets." I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "If you can promise me that I can eat steak every night for the next 3 months I'm here," he said, "I've got your bed sheets." I said, "When can we meet, sir?" We met the next day on the pad at 𝐁𝐨𝐵𝗄 Bay. I went by the Special Forces camp, got 2 AK-47s, went down, traded them for 2 cases of bacon wrapped filet mignon. We met, he gave me the bed sheets, I gave him his steaks, and I flew off to the mountains with my bed sheets.
As the war and possible solutions to it are discussed in other parts of the world, the results of the North Vietnamese offensive are an unforgettable reality here in South Vietnam. Long after the fighting stops, as it surely eventually will, all of this will remain part of the long heritage of the Vietnam War. Ron Miller, ABC News, My Chon.
I was very fortunate. I was lucky. I had God's blessing while I was there. Probably a guardian angel. It's not something that I take lightly. I appreciate how I was looked after over there. I'll give you one example of the power of God. I had 3 days to go until I come home. And me and Lieutenant Donaldson were sitting at the bar having a beer. It's late, about 10:30. And you can hear mortar rounds leaving a tube 3,500 meters away. It's a poop, 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 real muffled pop. But you look at your watch and you know you've got about 35 seconds until that shell is going to land on you. And I heard them come out, and I told him, I said, hey, they're coming out of the tube. He said, that's just Arvin, sit back down. Well, I'd had enough to drink, I believed him. I sat down on the bar stool, and about that time, the first one hits the back wall of the club, boom. I looked at him, I said, okay, Arvins. He went over the bar and got under it. I ran out the back door and made a dive for the ground. And a civilian PA&E agent was there. He's out there with me. His name was Clarence Needham. He was a civilian. Actually, he was probably hooked up with the CIA. Most of them were. He said, I'm going to the bunker. I said, Clarence, you better stay here. Well, he got up and ran. He made it to the bunker, but I stayed where I was. And them rounds were coming in, just one right after another, and I was doing some serious praying. And the last round that came in, if you were the wall of a steel Connex container, and I'm laying right here, well, about a foot from you, that last round came in, and that's where it impacted. It's about this long and about that big around, and it went off. It blew a hole in that steel Connex container about this big. Busted every bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey that we had, and I'm still laying there on the ground, and by this time, I guess it knocked me out, because when I came around to the smell of the whiskey running out, I'm thinking, is this what it's like to be dead? And I get to checking myself to see if I didn't have a scratch. Now, if that shell goes off right here, it will kill anything that's out there for 75 or 100 feet. I mean, it's deadly. I did not get a scratch, and I wasn't 6 feet from it. So that lends credibility to the 3 men in the fiery furnace and Daniel in the lion's den. If God don't want you to be hurt, you won't be. And I survived that. When you went home, you got to fly your helicopter, if you were a pilot, down to Cameron, and the co-pilot flew it back, and that's how you left. I went in to get my chopper to leave, and this crappy operations officer said, well, we've changed policy. You're going to have to catch a C-130 East Field. I told him, I said, Captain, just be glad I've already turned my 45 in. And I went out the door and I kicked something. Well, this Captain Fontaine Williams was a fact pilot, a friend of mine, and he sees me out there and he said, whoa, whoa, Norm, he said, calm down. He said, you're gonna stroke out. He said, what's got you fired up? And I told him what happened. He said, well, are you ready to go? I said, yes, sir. He said, get your bags, I'll take you out first class. He said, I've got the General's Baron down there on the pad. And he said, I'll take you out under 2 stars. This is what I left Vietnam in. That is a Beechcraft Baron, and that's how I left. Me and Captain Williams. So that's nice that we've got this Baron here because it fits the story. And he flew me up to Pleiku and parked on the VIP pad. I got my records, jumped back in. He flew me down to Cam Ranh. I got out on the runway and thanked him, and he flew off, and I went home. But that's how I left Vietnam, right there. I come back from Vietnam, and I became friends with a guy over at Poplar Bluff, Leo Schluter. His name was Tiny. He had Tiny Studio. Tiny and I would go to conventions together, and we visited back and forth, and we just became really close. And I noticed every 2 years Tiny'd have a new car. And I thought, man, what's he doing that I'm not doing? And he told me one day, he said, look, if you want to stay in this business and make a living at it, he said, Norm, you're going to have to get in the school business. He said, here's the secret. He said, you get in the school, you get you 1 or 2 schools, and he said, you keep that superintendent and that principal from having complaints. And he said, there's not anybody that can get you out of that school with a case of dynamite. He said, because one thing a principal or a superintendent doesn't want to hear is 600 mothers griping because their little boy or girl's picture didn't turn out. And he said, if you can do that, you're going to be there as long as you want to be. I've been in some of my schools 35 years.
I was from originally Arnold, Missouri, St. Louis area, but then I wound up at Commerce, Missouri when I turned like 12, 13. I went through high school at Kelly and graduated at Kelly High School at Benton. And then I wound up working for an insurance agency in Sikeston, and that's how I met Norm. And he made my pictures. I was married to someone else at that time, and he made photographs of our business, you know, business pictures for where I worked. And that's how I met Norm. And we were just always really good friends, you know, we just always...
A lot of mutual respect.
A lot of mutual respect and everything. And so when I wound up divorced from my first husband, I just decided one day I'd call Norm and ask him for a date. So that's how we met. Or we would never be together because if I would have waited for him, it would have never happened. So I just called and said, hey, are you still single? And he said, yes. I said, well, I am too. Let's get together and have fun. And so we have had fun ever since. So that's how we got together. I always felt like he had a gift with his photography. And then, of course, he was a judge. So I liked that, I don't know, just something about being settled and, you know, had some kind of substance to him. I liked that about him. That's why I was always thought he was a neat guy, you know, because he had a lot of stuff going for him. He had his own business, built it from nothing, you know, started from nothing, and you can do that. It's hard, and especially today it's hard, but you can do it, you know, and so that's what I liked about him.
instantly in love. The first day I saw her, she was there at the office. I had been hired by Mr. Byrd to come over and do the legal pictures on the Home Oil Company fire. And that's how I met Deb. And when I walked in the office, I walk in and there's this beautiful goddess sitting there at the desk. She's sitting on this raven black hair.
Yeah, I had
that's
pretty
down,
long black hair then.
I mean, gorgeous. And I looked, she's got a wedding ring on. I thought, yeah,
That's the first time he met me.
darn, she's married. Well, I've always respected women, and I treated her with respect, and we became friends. I never made a pass at her. I was just respectful to her. And we knew each other for probably 6 years. And one day I got a call to go back over there and do another job. And I got there and she's expecting.
Yeah.
I thought, good grief, what a waste.
That's
But
before I asked him for a date.
anyway, our relationship, friendly, continued. We just, the respect and everything. Then one day I'm sitting in my office on a Monday, got my feet up on the desk reading a book, and the phone rang. Now, I normally won't answer the phone on Monday, but I did that day. And it's her. Hi, this is Deb over at Davis and Byrd. You remember me? I thought, well, I ain't got Alzheimer's. And I said, yeah. She said, you still single? I said, yep. She said, well, so am I. You want to get together and have some fun? I thought, you are up there, aren't you? Thank you, Jesus.
We've been blessed ever
And
since.
we made a date. And she calls the next day and tries to back
Yeah, I
out.
did.
And I said, nah, I know where you live. Show up or I'll come and get you. She said, you really want to? I said, yes. So we did. And we've been together ever since. This is the treasure of my life right here. She really is.
I don't know about that, but anyway, he says that now. We'll see.
And I do have lung cancer.
It's not curable.
It's not curable, it's treatable. I have a weird abnormal gene that allowed me to take a targeted treatment for 18 months, which worked wonderful. At about month 17, it quit working, and I asked Dr. Morgenstern, I said, what do we do now? He said, chemo. And talk about being blessed. I've had my third treatment.
Never been sick.
I've never been sick. I've never had a stomach ache. I've never had any negative side effect from it, and it's working.
So far.
It's working. It's reversing the cancer, and
Got a good report.
So
We're blessed.
The good Lord wants me for something.
When the sun's going down, no stars in the sky, I'ma head down the road across county line, where they roll up the smoke